Hitler and the Nazis, they had established good economic conditions inside of Germany. And remember, they'd rebuilt the military. They created a lot of jobs programs similar to what the United States did. And Hitler and Nazis, people like they felt like they owed them something. They're like, hey, they kind of did make the country great. They brought us some pride back. You know, we feel a little bit better in the international community. But they are doing things like starting up the T4 program. And they also passed a set of laws called the Nuremberg Laws. And the Nuremberg Laws are going to do a couple of different things. One, it prevents Jews from marrying non-Jews. They came up with these crazy special charts that you had to follow if you wanted to marry somebody. So, for example, like if all your grandparents were in that area where they were racially considered racially pure, you know, you'd be good to go to marry somebody else that was racially pure. And you could also marry somebody that was just like 1/4 Jewish because your kids would only be 1/8 Jewish. So you're good to go there. But if you go down here, it's like, well, if you, like this with a little red cross there, and wanted to marry somebody that was half Jewish, like you could get special permission. But somebody that was 3/4 Jew or a whole Jew, nope, marriage prohibited. Right? If you had four grandparents, of course, everybody's got four grandparents, and three of them were considered pure. You know, your parents, maybe you're mixed there. You have a good scenario, a good outcome, but you had to follow this crazy little pattern here to see who you could marry if they were considered a Jew or a non-Jew. In fact, it was also illegal to have sex with somebody that was a Jew. And if you were a Jew, the same was true if somebody was not a Jew. So they specifically come up with these charts so you'll know who you're allowed to marry and who you're allowed to sleep with. Right? What's the Nazis' purpose for doing this? Exactly. We got to scientifically weed out the bad genes, and for them, the Jews were the people with bad genes. So we don't want them reproducing with our pure race. That's the mindset that Hitler and the Nazis have. Right? That's the first part of the Nuremberg laws. Second thing these laws did, all right? Jews had to wear on their clothing these patches with the six-pointed star and the term, the German word for a Jew, so that they could be easily identified and singled out. I'm trying to remember, but I know if you were caught, if it turns out you didn't have this patch on your clothing and you were out in public and the police apprehended you, I think the minimum sentence was like a year in prison. Like they took it seriously. So the Nuremberg laws have strict laws about who you can marry, who you can sleep with. You have to wear this on your clothing so that you're easily identifiable. And people, like when they saw this, they were like, look, that might be too much. A lot of German people who were Jews, if they had the ability, they tried to leave the country. And I was mentioning before, people like Albert Einstein, who had the means and the skills that other countries would want, they flee the country. They're like, it's time to get out of here. This is getting out of hand, right? So you have laws about who you can marry. You have to have this six-pointed star on your clothes so that you're easily identifiable. And what do you think Germans would do to the people that they saw wearing this six-pointed yellow star? Do you think they treated them as equals? No, you start becoming condescending to them because you're told constantly they're less than desirable, they're polluting our race. One more thing about the Nuremberg laws here. Jews had their citizenship rights taken away. They're no longer German citizens, meaning they couldn't hold government jobs. And more importantly, what are citizens allowed to do that's super important in a democracy? Vote. They no longer had voting rights. This is getting kind of hectic. Right? So the Nuremberg laws, they take away their voting rights, their citizenship. They're forced to wear an identifier on their clothing. And even if they thought you were Jews, and this is, I know this sounds kind of disgusting in a way, but back in the 1930s, if they thought somebody was a Jew, especially a man, what was the way they'd use to identify them? They'd make them pull down their pants. Why would they do that? The Jews had their males circumcised when they were young. A lot of places did not. So they were like, well, If that happened to you, then obviously you're a Jew. How humiliating. In the middle of public square, they would do that. All right. So people start looking at this, and this is from the New York Times. So the international community sees all this, and they start hearing about this, and they're like, "Hey, these Germans are pretty messed up towards the Jews here. Uh, I wonder what it's really like. Is it being overstated? What's going on over there?" Okay. And people had an opportunity to see. The next year, 1936, Hitler and the Nazis host the Olympic Games. All right. You see, here's the picture where they're bringing in the Olympic torch, and you see a runner bringing the Olympic torch. Everybody's doing the Hitler salute. Gosh. Now, Hitler doesn't really care. He's not what you call a sporty type of guy, but he still cares about the Olympics for what reason? The publicity. This is to him, it's a complete propaganda effort. And so when the Olympics are held and all these international athletes show up, the Nazis take down any signs that they had that would be considered anti-Jewish, and they told everybody, like, hey, let the athletes, regardless of their race or national origin, you let them go wherever they want. You don't give them a hard time. You be nice to them. Make everybody see that Germany's a great place. Right? They want to put on a good show. And also, Hitler cares about winning in the Olympics. Why does he care about winning in the Olympics? Prove his theories about eugenics and his master race. He's like, our master race is it's going to destroy people. We're going to be great. Okay? Believe me, they're not the only ones trying to put out a little propaganda. We'll get that in a second. Okay? Look, Hitler and the Nazis are so heavy on this when, you know how in the opening ceremonies they have a parade of all the athletes from all the countries where they come in and they all pass through the stadium. Hitler wanted all the athletes from all countries to do the Hitler salute coming in and to like dip their flag, lower their flag when they went by Hitler's press box. And some nations actually did it. But you know who didn't do it? America. We're like, hey, we don't dip our flag to anybody. Like, sorry, Hitler, we're not doing the Hitler salute. Now, America very keenly aware of Hitler wanting to win the Olympics. And if you know anything about Olympics, what are the most important events, like the show events, the ones that everybody wants to win? Do you guys know anything about the Olympics? Track and field. Track and field are always the events that are considered like the glory events, particularly at this time. And right here in the middle, you see an American. Anybody know who this guy is? Jesse Owens, famous Olympic sprinter. And Jesse Owens, before he came into the Olympics, was widely considered to be one of the best runners in the world. And when he goes to the Olympics in 1936, he wins not one, not two, not three, but four gold medals, which solidly does what to Hitler's theory on the master race? Shoots it down completely. Look, the Americans wanted to beat the Nazis so bad that Owens already had three gold medals, and there was a relay race that they wanted him to compete in, and they already had a four-person team on the American squad, and they took a guy out and put Owens in there to make sure that they won. Now, there is a little bit of irony to this situation. Jesse Owens wins the gold medals, four gold medals at the 1936 games, but why is that ironic that America is putting out this black athlete? America is racist and segregated. What do we know about southern states and how they treated black people? It's a segregated society. All right? It's a strange place. It's a strange thing. But America says, look, our athletes are superior to yours, Hitler. Incidentally, I'm reading a book now. If you ever get a chance, it's pretty good. It's called Boys in the Boat, and it's about a rowing team, a crew team from the University of Washington that competes and wins a gold medal in the 1936 games. At, what is it? Yeah, it's pretty good. Yes, it is. You take it back. It's super interesting. All right. And rowing used to be considered a big time sport as well. All right. Rowing was on par with like football and track and field back in the day. And now we're like, nah, it's rowing. All right. So the Olympics are a big event. Okay. And everybody remembers Jesse Owens. Another fun fact: Jesse Owens today, a lot of sports scientists estimate that if he had like the track composition that they use today and shoes and equipment that they have today, that he would be as fast as Usain Bolt, if not a little bit faster. I'm like, oh, that's my guy right there. Jesse Owens, he's the man. All right. Now, 1936 Olympics, Hitler and the Nazis, they put on a good face for the rest of the world. All right. But after the Olympics are over, things go back to Hitler and the Nazis doing their Hitler and Nazi type things, including some new type of things that started occurring in Germany. You see a rash, it's around 1937, 1938, that a rash of book burnings occur inside of Germany. You have events like this, where people would show up and they'd bring books and they just burn them. Oh gosh, who does that, Losh? Shelley Brooks is probably cringing. Okay, wait a second. What kind of books are they burning? You're on the right track, but what specifically? What types of books would they hate for anybody to read? You're getting on the right track. Which religion or which group of people would they not want you to read about? Jews. Anything that was considered written by a Jew or pro-Jewish, they wanted to burn it. Anything that was pro-communist, they wanted to burn it because they're like, hey, that's trash. You don't need to read that. Right? They're the enemy. We don't need any other voices. We only need our Fuhrer, Herr Hitler, to tell us what to do. All right? This stuff right here, garbage. Right? Even books like, remember we mentioned in The Lost Generation, a German writer, Erich Remarque, who wrote All Quiet on the Western Front, and it talked about the realities of World War I and trench warfare. The Germans even burned that because they said, look, he was kind of a wuss, and war is a glorious thing. It's not a terrible thing. You should be excited to fight for your country. And they didn't want anybody to think opposite of that. Now, the crazy thing about these book burnings that happen in large numbers, okay, is that originally the Nazi Party themselves, it wasn't their idea. Okay? Originally, college students started doing it, and the Nazis were like, that's a good idea. You can see, like, they talk about college students, they're burning all types of books. They start coming up with this idea on their own. And that included science books that suggested that races were not like, that one race wasn't superior to the others. Can you imagine that? Like massive, like, let's have a bonfire. Okay, we need some kindling. I'll chop some wood down. I'll bring some books. All right. And that's why today we have such an aversion to book burning. Like that's like considered kind of taboo. How many of y'all's English teachers have made you read Fahrenheit 451? I love it. It's one of my favorite books. Right. One of them. Who knows who might be the victim of a well-read man? Reading is dangerous for people. You don't want other voices getting in the way. Now, question for you. Could something like that happen in the United States? Book burning? You don't think so? That's great.